Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast help you cruise a little smarter. And I'd like to welcome all the way down in Florida. She's not dealing with snow like Bryan and I are. She's living her fabulous life in the sun. How you doing today, Christy?
I'm well. I'm so grateful that I'm not losing power like Detroit right now.
You sent me those pictures of the ice storm in Detroit, and there's nothing worse than ice. We've had enough of that up here in Portland. We've got our snow out here on the West Coast, and I'm just going to have them come jump right in right away. Our guest today to answer a guest question all the way over in Utah. How you doing today, Bryan?
I'm cold and ready for a cruise to someplace warm. But other than that, I'm doing great.
If you're living on the West Coast, you know what we're talking about, because the weather has been wonky this whole winter, and I've never seen so much snow in quite a while, I guess. So we haven't personally had it until just this last night, but you guys have gotten quite a bit, haven't you, Bryan?
There's a reason why our motto or whatever is the greatest snow on earth. We've had lots of snow here, lots of snow.
Let's turn to our main topic today. We got a listener question, and we really appreciate all the listener questions. After Bryan, you came out and did such a great job on your port adventures and helping people out with port adventures. One of the questions that she had, Michelle wrote to us and said, "Hey, I really enjoyed the podcast, but it never answered the biggest question in my mind. How does a family of 6 travel on the Fantasy? All of the staterooms I've looked at sleep a maximum of 5, other than concierge if you get a 2-bedroom. I'd love to hear a discussion of how to travel with a family of 6 on Disney Cruise Line." So I threw it out to our Patreons, and we got a bunch of different responses back, which I'll include as well in this discussion today. But Chad, thank you for throwing Bryan back under the bus and saying, "Hey, Bryan did such a good job of the podcast, and he's got a big family. Maybe he'd be a good person to bring back on and talk about it." And since you've been on so many different cruises, thank you so much, Bryan, for coming on and helping us answer this question.
Yeah, no problem. I definitely have cruised with a family of 6 so on the Fantasy, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. It was one of my big questions when we first started looking at Disney Cruise Line was, hey, this doesn't look as easy as going to Disneyland with a family of 6, so how are we going to figure it out? Spoiler alert, it actually works really well once you figure it out, and we love it, but it does require a little bit, there are some things that they don't talk about that aren't really obvious about how it all works.
Okay, well, let's just jump into it since we've been talking about other things. Her question was specifically in staterooms. We're going to talk about several other different topics as well with this subject, but let's just start with the cabins, Bryan. And when you're thinking of a family of 6, what are the options that you consider?
Yeah, they don't sleep 6 in any of the cabins except maybe, the Tower Suite on the Wish would, but unfortunately, that's not something I'm going to be doing anytime soon. So what we do is we do adjoining cabins. So Disney does have a number of cabins in different categories on the ship that are adjoining, meaning they're 2 cabins side by side that share a common wall, and there's a door that you can open and make that 2 cabins basically one big cabin. It's a normal sized door, so you're not like opening the whole wall or anything, but it's just like adjoining hotel rooms in a land hotel.
Connecting door.
Connecting doors. That's the correct term. Thank you. And so that's what we do is we do connecting cabins. A couple things about that. When you book those cabins, you have to have an adult in each cabin. So when we book with our family of 6, I've got my wife and me and 4 kids. We will book that my wife's in one room with 2 of the kids and I'm in the other room with 2 of the kids. That doesn't mean that's actually the sleeping arrangements that we use, though. You can rearrange where people sleep once you are on board. But from a booking perspective, you have to put one adult in one cabin with 2 of the kids and the other adult in the other cabin with 2 of the kids. Now, I have heard of people doing this where if their kids are a little older, they might do a cabin, like a veranda, and then do the inside stateroom across the hall. We have never done that. We always want to have the open door between the cabins. So we've always done it with connecting cabins, but we've done it in an ocean view category and we've done it in a veranda category, and both offer those. So depending on the ship you're on, you've got different options. What we found is on the classic ships, there are a lot more ocean views than there are, or the ratio of ocean view to a veranda is such that you can save some money by going with an ocean view. And so we've done that several times. On the Dream and the Fantasy, there's less ocean view cabins. And so the price difference between ocean view and veranda has made it that when we've looked at it, the price difference between the ocean view that were available, and veranda was small enough that we've been pushed into verandas on those larger ships. And to be honest, it's really nice that way. But, you take a look at it there, that may have just been cabin availability when we've booked.
No, and I feel like many of the times it does work out like that. Certainly it needs to be addressed. The Wish is also similar to the Dream and the Fantasy in many occasions where there's not much, like the Wish is the one with the least amount of savings between the categories. And it's a very slim margin between an inside and ocean view and a veranda. So you're within sometimes $100 to just get a veranda versus an inside cabin. So that's just something to consider when you're looking at that in the future.
For sure. Well, one other nice thing about a connecting stateroom is that in addition to that interior door between the two staterooms that you can have propped open, they can remove the barrier on the veranda, so you have a larger veranda as well, which we've enjoyed with our kids. I've heard that's not possible on certain cabins, but it has been every time we've tried.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, that in theory, some of the time, there's going to be a block there that it won't be able to open because it connects the other way, or Disney has an aesthetic look that they're going for. So that door can't always be opened. And let me just say one more thing. I think we talked about this on my Christmas cruise. We had my mom in an adjacent cabin. So that would be a cabin next to ours, but did not have a connecting door in the middle. And in that case, we were able to open up the balcony. And maybe if you had older kids and you didn't need that internal door to always hear and always know what's going on, I guess, in the next room, that's a good option too. If you had older kids that you didn't mind them having a little bit of that freedom, is if you couldn't find two connecting rooms and you could determine that balcony door could open, you could at least have the ability to go from one cabin to the other without going to the hall and just by going out into the balcony.
And that is a good point. There are a limited number of connecting cabins. We have never run into a problem where we couldn't find one on a cruise, but we've generally booked fairly far in advance. And so that could definitely be a difference. One other thing to call out about that is if you're going to book a guaranteed or one of the restricted categories where you don't get to pick your actual cabin, then you can't guarantee that you have a connecting cabin. So that's been something we haven't been able to do. We've been on some sailings where they were offering really good special rates, and we were like, ooh, that's very tempting. But because we want connecting cabins and we want to be guaranteed connecting cabins, we just have to pay the regular rate. We can't take advantage of those offers.
So 2 questions, Christy. We booked VGT rates for the summer because it was so much cheaper to do VGT. We've actually got 2 cabins. And one of the things she said, and I do take credit.
Just really quick before, so that I have all the facts. Do you have the same cabin category for the VGT or different cabin categories?
The same.
Okay.
So it's not really a question, but I do take credit for it a little bit. They do, if there's the ability to do so, they do try, if you're sailing in a group, to put you somewhat close together, if they can do it.
They do. And Disney actually, because in my travel agent groups, we see this discussed a lot. They really do their best, but there could be more people than abilities. It may not work out. And it works maybe on the flip side. If you are traveling with somebody and you're guaranteed and you're linked for dining and they're guaranteed, or they have a cabin somewhere, if you don't want a connecting room, you need to call Disney or have your travel agent do it if you're using travel agent and have them unlink the cabins for that guaranteed rate, because Disney will try so hard to link you. And we had a connecting cabin with one of my friends and her family, and we were friends. And I didn't necessarily need that. I did not desire that door in the middle to be opened between us, traveling with friends and our kids and, her husband and child. We didn't need that door to swing in the middle of our cruise together. Like, Steve, if you and I were cruising together, we would not have that door open during our cruise if it was connecting. We would like each other. We'd say hi in the balcony, but some boundaries probably, right?
You don't need to hear my snoring. That's right.
We all don't need to hear each other's chats with the neighbors or with our families. Yeah, you just want to mark it either way if you want them connecting or not. And then if you're connecting, if you get the room and it's guaranteed, you can't really change it. So something to keep in mind. Whatever room they give you is what you get.
So not to take away from your point, Bryan, because that's the way we generally feel is we want to be able to control where we stay for a lot of reasons, just like you're talking about. So one last question before we move on to the online check-in portion of this. So my question, though, I guess, is that when you book a room, you've got to put people in the rooms when you make that booking. But when you actually sail, you don't necessarily have to keep the same people in those rooms, but their key cards are associated with those rooms. What do you do in that instance?
Yeah, that's a good point. So because we generally prop the room open, the door between the two cabins open, we don't worry about it too much. But we have had occasions where somebody closes that door or I want to be able to get in the other. And so you can go to guest services and request a second key. So for example, when we get on, my wife has and my two daughters have their keys to one room and me and my sons have keys to the other room. I've gone up to guest services and said, can I get a key to the other room? Showed my ID. They see that they're linked. They've given us an extra key for my wife and I so we can get in the opposite door if we need to. So you absolutely can request that extra key. The other thing I wanted to talk about the configuration for sleeping that's worth calling out is when you're a family of 6, if you're looking on the website and you put in that you want 2 cabins and 3 people in each cabin, they're only going to show you cabins that accommodate 3 people in each cabin. But depending on your family configuration, they have cabins that support 4 and 5. You may want to have 2 adjoining cabins that have 4 in each because you want each child to have their own bed. You don't want any children to have to share, right? Because you've got the big bed in each room and then you've got the sofa bed, but potentially there are pull down berths. And so that's something to think about. For my family, we've done it different ways. We've had 3 and 3 cabins that only supported 3. We've had cabins where both supported 4. We've had a cabin where one supported 3 and one supported 4. For us, we found that fighting over who gets the big bed on their own is not a lot of fun. And so we don't mind. We've got my 2 daughters share a bed fine. So we're okay doing 3 and 3 and putting 2 girls in the big bed and then giving the boys each their own sofa bed to avoid some contention over who's going to get the big bed. But other family configurations that may not work. And so if you've got a travel agent, which if you're going to do adjoining cabins and do all this, I highly, highly recommend get a travel agent so that they can help with all of this. They can call Disney and make sure that they know the sleeping arrangements so that you can have a cabin that sleeps 4 adjoining to a cabin that sleeps 3, if that's the bed configuration you need for your family. So it's available, but they just don't show it on the website. And so you do need to call Disney or, like I said, even better, work with a travel agent. Christy happens to be my travel agent, and it works out really well because she always makes sure we get a great room configuration, and it's always been good. So
many battles there, Bryan, that I didn't even thought about. I mean, we just had to battle who gets the top bunk. So, but when you're battling the big bed and the top bunk on either side and everything else, think about those battles ahead of time, I guess, if you're going through all these plannings and how you might mitigate them, I guess. How's that?
Yeah, for sure. And one other thing on that, and Christy, I haven't worried about it because you just take good care of me, but I should clarify too, when you arrange where they are, there are different rates for different aged children, correct, with Disney? Yeah.
I think what we did is I weighed them one time. I looked at, because I don't really know what those age ranges are. Like, I don't know how Disney, are little kids more expensive than big kids? I assume like the older teenagers are the most expensive. I don't know why I never paid attention. I just know different age children cost different amount of money. So we usually do try to make sure the price won't be different in a multiple cabin situation, because like in a situation where there's a family of 6 and there's 3 and 3, the first 2 people are paying adult prices no matter what. So you would want older kids that are going to cost more to be the adult anyway, because they're going to cost more, if that makes sense. They're already going to cost more. They're either going to cost more as the 3rd guest, so you might as well make them cost more as the 2nd guest. I don't know if that makes sense. We're starting to become in Christy's bedtime territory, and it's been a long week, but so well, hopefully that sort of makes sense.
That was the point I wanted to make. Guest number 2 in the cabin is treated as an adult. So put your older kids as guest number 2, even if that's not the cabin they're going to be in, and put your younger ones as guest number 3 so that you're getting maximum savings.
Because in a family of 6, unless you have 5 children and you're one adult, then I just think Disney doesn't work for you. And I actually had this happen once. And I think Disney said, I'm sorry, they can't cruise. I think it was a situation where a woman wanted to take her kids and somebody else's or something and wanted to do this connecting cabins, but they didn't have another adult. And I hope that Disney has since changed that, because this was years and years and years ago. So hopefully they've changed it so that, a single parent can take, or if they have 5 kids and there's only one adult, one parent. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. In Bryan's case, now I shove the boys in one and the girls in another because it's easy for me. And I feel like it's easy for them too. And it still works out price wise because I double check it. But then they know all the time the adult with the boys, the dad and the boys are in one, and they're for their particular family, right? And the mom and the girls are in another. And they always know then whose key card does what.
Which works out nicely because we have 2 and 2. But yes, because just so I don't forget about this, one of the things, for example, is when you go off of the ship, there are times when it's best to have the adult and the kids that are in that room with them have those key cards together and go off together. And so remembering who's in whose room is definitely convenient at a few of those cases where you're, especially when you're disembarking the ship at the end of the cruise, they like to have you grouped together by cabin.
Yeah, okay, they like to know who's leaving and they want to keep track of all of that.
Okay, let's move into online check-in. Bryan, you said you had a couple points here as far as online checking in possibly with the cabins.
Yes, I just did online check-in. And so the first thing is, if you're a single family, got 2 cabins, like the setup like we've been talking about, you do have to check in separately for each cabin. So I had to go through and do online check-in, fill it all out, pick a port arrival time for my cabin, and then I went back through online check-in for my wife's cabin. I did that for her and had to pick a port arrival time for her. Couple things about that. One, you can end up, and this has happened to us a couple times, where each cabin has a slightly different port arrival time. They've always been like within 15 minutes of each other, but you can get in a situation where because you're doing them one after the other, they have different times. When we've done that, we've never had an issue just going with the first one. I think Disney says go with the later one, but to be honest, ours have been close and we've gone with the first one and never had an issue. But that is something to be aware of that can come up, is you can end up with different port arrival times. The other thing to be aware of is you are basically checking in each one. And so when I go through the first one, the one nice thing is when I get to the part where I have to set up the financial and the onboard account, I can set up a credit card, and I have the ability, because my reservations are linked, to say I'm taking financial responsibility for the other cabin and for my wife and the kids in that other cabin, and set up all their charges. That's one thing I can do when I check in on the first cabin, but almost everything else I have to do again separately for the second cabin. A couple things to call out about that: when you set up the kids, they will ask you who's allowed to take this kid off of the boat, and you can't just say the adult in the cabin with them thinking, oh, well, we're married, we're both parents, there are kids. You actually have to select an option to grant others access or permission to take them off the boat. And then your spouse will show up in the other cabin. You can select them, because by default, only the adult in the cabin with the child can take them off the boat in a port. If you want your spouse to be able to take your child off in a port and you've put that child in the other cabin, because of how you had to book the reservations during online check-in, you need to make sure you mark, oh, yes, I'm going to grant. And it comes up and you can select another adult traveling in the other stateroom, and they come up and they let you select it, but you do have to go through that process. On the same note, when you're setting up who can check people out of the kids club, same thing. You have to go in and grant permission. Seems kind of weird for mom to check the boys out of the kids club if you want to do that, because by default, it's linked to the adult in the stateroom the child is in, even if you are married and have custody of all your kids.
Yeah. And that makes it easier for Disney to not have to double check who is the parent, who, you know what, at that point, once you've made it on the ship, they've determined parental ownership is the wrong word, but they've determined the parents of a child or guardians. And so, because they've looked at that paperwork or looked at the approval from if the parent or guardian is not on the ship with them, yes, the adults in that cabin have the permission. And that's the same if you're traveling with your grandparents, or for us, because we travel with my mom, she's a single. So we throw a person in her cabin always from my family because she's paying for two basically anyway, besides port expenses. So we then have to give permission for that cabin to have permission to do whatever. And usually Dave is in the cabin with my mom, which is creepy if you think about it. But as we always just move him officially to our cabin at some point during the cruise.
So Christy, another question for you and Bryan, maybe if you've experienced this, but say I'm just an avid listener of the DCL podcast and I listen to all the tips and tricks and everything like this. And I even listen to this podcast like 5 times trying to figure it all out. And we go through the online check-in and I forget to do all this stuff. And we get on the ship and realize that we haven't done it. Is there a way to resolve this situation on the ship?
Yeah, there's a form you can fill out on board. So, and I think Steve, didn't we do this or almost do this on our group cruise, on our podcast cruise together? Because I was maybe going to take Alex somewhere or something like that. Oh, he was going to be in my cabin, but that wasn't even the reason. We did it on the Wish and our kids were all swapped back to wherever their cabins belonged.
I think we're wondering about
Castaway.
Castaway, if he, because he was going to stay on the ship and maybe he was going to come out with you. So I guess just know that if you forget to do this or you anyways, you get on the ship and you didn't get it done and you want to make a change, then you can go to guest services and they should be able to rectify these situations.
It's an easy form you can fill out. It doesn't take long at all.
Okay. Anything else about online check-in, Bryan?
No, I was just going to add for the kids club checkout privileges stuff, both for what adult can check them out, along with if you want to give self-checkout privileges, along with if you want one of their older siblings to have permission to check a younger sibling out of the kids club. That's all on online check-in, but they all review it all when you go the first time to the kids club on board, and they're happy to change it right there when you're reviewing it, when you check your kids in for the first time. So all the kids club stuff is also very easy to do, and they really walk through it with you the first time you drop your kid off anyways.
Well, let's run with the kids club stuff then. Any other points there? And I will say that like once your kids get a little bit older, you get an older sibling there. It's nice to have that to say, hey, Andrew, go pick up Alex in the kids club and we'll meet you at dinner. Because sometimes it just makes a little, because your mom and I are going to enjoy this one more walk around deck 4. So
yeah, let's talk kids clubs just for a minute, because if you're a family of 6 like ours, it's a little more likely that you have kids spanning more age ranges. And so we've experienced this, a couple of things. The kids clubs do have different age ranges. Oceaneers Lab and Club is 3 to 12, and Edge, the tween club, is 11 to 14. And then Vibe, the teen club, is 15 to 18, or 15 to 17, I guess. Once you turn 18, you age out. You can get in a situation like where my 2 daughters, one of them was technically 10 and the other was 13, and the 10-year-old really wanted to go with her sister, to Edge. They actually will allow you when you're 10, you can go and ask, and you can fill out a form to give permission for your child to age up so that they can be with their sibling. I don't know if they had a ton of kids in that tween club age, it may be availability limited, but we've never had an issue with it. Our last couple of cruises, we've done that. So 10-year-old can go with older sister and age up to the older club. So that's just something to be aware of. And I believe something similar works between Edge and Vibe as well. You couldn't have somebody from, the youngest kids club age up to Vibe, but if you had a tween in the Edge age range, 11 to 14, that wanted to go with an older sibling to Vibe, you could, I believe you could fill out a form to do that. We haven't tried that one yet, but it was no problem to get someone from Oceaneers Club up into Edge. And so that's a nice thing to know, because often siblings want to be able to hang out together on a cruise. Thing, like I mentioned, is that your older siblings, those who are older, can have permission to check the younger one out of the kids club, which is super convenient if you want to give them that opportunity.
And to your point too, it also works the opposite way to go down too. So if you have somebody that's 11 or 12, and up in the Edge, and Alex did that with Blake on our Wish cruise, right, Christy?
Yeah. And Alex had a great time the night that they spent together and in the Oceaneers Club. So yeah, you can be 12 and hanging out in Edge the whole weekend, right? And never see that kid when we're on a cruise with him. And then he can come back down to the Oceaneers Club or Lab when it suits them, which is nice. I appreciate that. The
key point there is you can age down when you're in the overlap. So yeah. I've had people ask me this: do you have to decide if I'm 11? Do I have to decide if I'm going to Edge or Oceaneers Club? No, you can go back and forth whenever you want. But once you turn 13, you can't go down because
right. I feel like at one point it used to be a rule that people had to pick their club, but that was a long time ago. So it makes more sense to allow them to be kids. And if they want to be with, doing the Pluto's pajama party, they can do that.
What we have observed is when you're on the younger age of the range, a lot of times if you go up to the older club, if you're an 11-year-old, if you've got somebody there, you'll have fun there. But if you don't really know anybody, you might have more fun in the kids club. And so that's kind of what we've observed.
I can understand that.
Andrew did that the very first time he was eligible. He went, I'm going to go up to Edge. And I think he spent about an hour up there. And then he went back down to the clubs because he was having more fun down there. But I like the fact that it's flexible. So anything else about the kids clubs, Bryan?
I think that covers kids clubs.
All right, let's turn to dining then with a large group. A lot of dynamics there is trying to just herd all 6 of you to dinner at the same time. Talk about some of your thoughts about dining with a large group.
Yeah, I'll say this is where the value from DCL really comes in for me personally, is with the dining. Because let's face it, when you vacation with your kids, even at home, somebody always doesn't want what's for dinner, and somebody always wants something else, and somebody else usually wants to eat at a different time. So if you're on vacation, it can often be hard to get everybody to want to eat the same thing, or you've got one kid who doesn't want to eat now, and then they're going to be hungry later. Or the other thing is they want to try something and then they don't like it, and then you don't want them to be hungry, so then you feel you have to buy something else. So let's be honest, a Disney cruise is not an inexpensive endeavor, but this is one of the places we see the real value is there's no stress about the food because it's all almost entirely all included. And so now I can go with my kids, and if one of them doesn't feel like eating at that time, no big deal. We can get room service later. We can go up, get pizza on the pool deck later. No worries about that. And so that's a real value, especially for a large family where coordinating meals can be stressful, and it just doesn't have to be it's not on Disney Cruise Line. Though I think what you were getting at was maybe more the rotational dining in the evenings where, you get an assigned table. And so part of this is linking your reservations. You've got 2 cabins. You do want to make sure they're linked, which if you book them together on the website, maybe happens automatically. I don't know, because I've always used a travel agent. My travel agent just magically makes all that stuff happen for me.
It only recently did they allow you to book 2 cabins at the same time. And so that would link those cabins. But otherwise, we manually had to go in and link them.
Again, another reason to use a travel agent. There's lots of travel agents out there, but I highly recommend using one. Once you're linked, then you're all going to be sat together at dinner. One thing that is, and so you're going to be at a table that supports your whole family. Same sort of thing if you're traveling with friends and you want to link dining. I don't know that there's a whole lot to say there. I will say as a family of 6, we've never been seated with anybody else. I know if you're a smaller party, there's the potential that they link multiple cabins together, but I don't think they have any tables that, without pushing them together, naturally accommodate more than 6 people. And so I've never worried about requesting a private table because logistically, they're just not going to put me with anybody else. So I haven't ever worried about that.
Except for on the Wish. There are very long tables on the Wish. So a lot of them, especially, everywhere. Like Marvel has the long tables. And I think that's just the design setup. 1923 is probably the only place without as many naturally long tables.
Okay. So maybe if I cruise on the Wish, that could come up where we get seated with another family, but not been a real concern for me. Otherwise, I don't think I have any other comments to make about dining. I guess I could say if you have an adjoining cabin, you can order room service for the whole family from one cabin. You don't have to place an order for half in one and half the other. That's not an issue. But I don't think there's anything else about dining to call out unless you've got a specific question or thought that I've missed.
No, I guess you made a good point there. As your kids get older, it makes it a little bit easier to do this especially if some of them sleep in, you're like, we're going to go to Cabanas at 8, just meet us down there when you guys wake up or whatever else. It's a little bit tougher when kids are smaller and you're trying to move together as a family, I guess, and do those things. But any thoughts about breakfast in the morning, like moving through Cabanas at all as a larger group?
My kids are pretty independent. But I could see if you had really little kids that could be a little bit of a challenge with the age range that we have. And when we started cruising, it hasn't been an issue. I will say cast members are really helpful, though. There have been a couple of times when I was helping my youngest with a tray or something like that, and cast members saw that I was struggling and offered to just take it so I didn't have to carry as much. So I've had that happen multiple times where the Disney cast members are aware. And if they didn't see it, you're always welcome to grab them and say, hey, can you help me carry this? Especially if you've got little kids. Even if you don't have a family of 6 and you've got 2 little kids you're trying to get food from the buffet, don't hesitate to ask a cast member for help. They're willing to. They often will proactively offer if they see you, but if they don't, feel free to flag somebody down.
Same if you have a person who's using a cane or something like that, because that makes it difficult to hold trays. And if you're trying to do that, they are willing to step in for that as well.
For sure. That's one of the great things about cruising is if you've got some of those challenges, the cast members are always happy to help out. And as your kids grow, I mentioned the value thing and they eat more. Teenagers, I know you experience this with 2 teenage boys, Steve. Once again, that included food becomes a huge value. And when I first looked at Disney Cruise Line, I felt like it was a lot more expensive. And then I started adding up, well, how much do I pay for a hotel, for park tickets, for food at the park, for restaurants? Even if I'm not doing a Disney vacation, what am I paying for? And suddenly you realize the value is quickly there. You just have to pay for it in one lump sum instead of all spread out.
Oh my gosh.
Think of your savings just in Mickey bars. You want your whole family to have a Mickey bar. That's $36 every time, just about.
Or shows. I took my kids to the Lion King when it came through town, and that was an expensive endeavor. And yes, the full-on Broadway touring production is different than what you see on the Disney Cruise Line, but we just love going to the theater. We love musicals. And for my kids, the hour-long performance on a Disney cruise is about the same experience for them and equally enjoyable, and dinner is included. And so I figured out, taking six people tickets to a Broadway show plus dinner, what does that cost? And you get 3 Broadway shows that are, in the enjoyment factor in the same ballpark for me, and dinner included and dessert on all of those real quickly. It's a real value.
I totally agree. And to get back to your point, I once cruised, actually now I've cruised several times with somebody that has a gluten allergy. And boy, what a joy that is, because she just comes back and sits at the back of the ship and we enjoy the sun and the cast members just bring her food to her all the time. And it's just so nice.
I have to say, Cabanas is the one place, a buffet, especially a Disney ship, a buffet and a Disney ship is the one place. I'm not waiting in that omelet line. Donald's Cantina on the Wish. I don't have to wait in that line. It's the one time my food comes out quicker. I just place my order and go and sit. Although you guys have been done eating for like 45 minutes half the time by the time I get my food. So
that is a true point. You just have a little bit of fun with you there. But I want to go back to Bryan's point, and as we kind of finish up on this topic, we just went and saw Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Whatever it is. I'm so bad at that.
Title.
I know. Ant-Man and the Wasp. Anyways, 3 of us. And it was like $45 for the 3 of us for the matinee too, which I don't even know if it's any cheaper than matinee because we hardly ever go to movies anymore. But,
movies cost $15 a ticket?
Where we went, I guess. And that wasn't even like the fancy, that was just like 2D, not 3D and everything else that they do these days. But yeah, it can add up quite a bit. So I do like your point as far as if you really look at the value of what you're getting, you do get a lot of value in these cruises. So, well, before we talk about money saving tips, let's touch on port adventures and then we'll finish it up with money saving tips.
Yeah. The only thing really to note about port adventures is once your reservations are linked, unlike online check-in, you can check everybody in or pick port excursions for everybody at once. It'll show everybody when you go in to book a port adventure or the Princess Gathering or any of the other online things that you can book ahead of time. You just have to go check the boxes for everybody you want to include. So if you want to do a port adventure as a family, one person can go in and book that port adventure for everybody. The one thing I'll call out, because I've seen it on by cruise groups lately, a couple of people, I've never experienced this personally because I usually am on right at midnight booking my port adventures. But if you wait and there's limited availability, you can run into a situation where the port adventure shows available because they've got 4 slots, but they don't have 6 slots. And so I have heard from other people that had a family where they were like, oh, we can only get 3 people in the port adventure. And that can be a problem. Obviously, once you're on board, you can always go ask if there's more availability or try and work things out with Disney once you go on board. But I think it is if you're with a large group, whether it's family or not, and you always all want to do something, make sure you get on and do that early.
And the problem with waiting to get on board to work it out is the 3 that already have, if it's 3, whatever the number is, that already have the port adventure. Once you get on board, it's not refundable. They're charging your card for it. And sometimes Disney will work it out to maybe refund it, or if there was a wait list. But we've had friends that then wanted to change something and thought that they had opportunity or something looked different once they noticed something more about the port adventure. And Disney was like, I'm sorry, but those port adventures are not refundable anymore.
So you may not want to sign up for anything and just hope you can find 6 when you get on board. Or go outside of Disney. That's the other thing I'll point out real quick. Disney does offer some private port adventure options where you can the fixed price regardless of the number of people. And once you start to get a larger group, those private port adventures where you're hiring a driver or hiring somebody just for you can start to make more financial sense, because you start multiplying the per person by 6, and suddenly that total is actually similar to a private port adventure. So something to consider. Moving on to money saving tips, because I know we're running low on time. One thing I haven't heard talked about recently a lot on the podcast is some of the money saving options if you have a Disney Visa. So this is something, we've had a Disney Visa for a while, but they have 2 tiers. And when we started cruising, we realized that there is a tier where you have to pay an annual fee. I think it's like $50 a year, but you get double back from Disney purchases. And if you're paying for cruises, that quickly makes it worthwhile. Even with the annual fee, you suddenly get enough money back that every time we go on a cruise, we have enough on our Disney Rewards redemption from that Disney credit card and putting our Disney on the card. We got several $100s that we can use for anything. You can apply it to anything on your onboard account. So Disney Cruise Line will let you put your Disney Rewards redemption card on your account and use it there. You can also use it in any other places you can use that. But I do think that we realized that paying for that higher tier made a lot of sense once we started cruising. And that's definitely gave it a $700 of play money, if you will, on each of our cruises.
You can actually purchase onboard credit prior to your cruise yourself. And I guess somebody said you could do this online now. I don't know if this is true, but they said that if you use your Disney Visa and you purchase onboard credit, it does the 6 months same as cash part, like it would. So you can like Steve, if you're going to Europe and you're going to take Disney excursions and you know that you're going to spend $1,000 on Disney excursions, you could pre-buy it before your cruise and then start making some payments towards that, and then not have it all just be due, the 30 days when your cruise is over. I would like somebody to confirm that you get the 6 months. So one of our listeners write in and confirm that you get the 6 months, same as cash for onboard credit, but you can use your Disney redemption card to buy onboard credit if you'd like to not stand in the line at guest services to use that card when you get on board. You can also use that redemption card to pay for your cruise. So you can give that to your travel agent or do it yourself if you're paying for it. And then when you get on board, if you have a Disney Visa, there is a 10% discount for merchandise for purchases over $50. So at one time, you have to spend more than $50, and then you can get 10% off with your Disney Visa. And it works for spa appointments on port days as well. You can get 10% off your spa appointment. And it's probably select services in the spa, so you can talk to Disney about that. But there is definitely a discount for that.
And that's something we make my kids all pick out what they want, and then we wait to go buy it till we have the $50, which is not hard to do on a Disney gift prices. But yeah, so all good call outs. And just to clarify what Christy was referring to is the Disney Visa. If you pay for your cruise with your Disney Visa, you also do get 6 months interest-free financing on that. And I am going to try buying onboard credit ahead this time, and it'll show me on my statement whether it turns into the 6 months interest-free or not. So I'll let you know, Christy.
Perfect. And you better do that soon because your cruise is coming up.
I got a cruise coming up. The only other money-saving tip, and you've talked about this before, is that we have learned to try and figure out when in our kids' school calendar is not a busy time for everybody else. We're fortunate our district has gotten the clue, and I actually volunteered recently to serve on I haven't been appointed, but I said I'm always willing to be on the calendar committee because I would love to see us pick more vacation times that aren't busy. But October for us, we have a fall break, and October has turned out to be a less expensive time to cruise. Spring break is less expensive than summer, especially because spring break, depending where on the country you are, it can be a little bit different. And if you're on the peak spring break, it tends to be pretty expensive. But if you're on one of the shoulder spring breaks, and so that's the other big thing for us is we've really had to dictate our cruising based on, what's not peak time. I'm not going to pay for a cruise in July because they're just too expensive. But you can find times that the kids are out of school, hopefully that are a little less expensive. And then the other thing is, we've sailed on all 4 of the original ships. They're all great. If you can choose a port and a ship that is close to you, so you don't have to fly, so you can drive, you can save a bunch of money that way. And I think sometimes people get hung up on, especially if they haven't cruised before, am I going to like this ship? I need to be on the newest or whatever ship. But all the Disney ships have their wonderful things about them, and they're all enjoyable. And so that's another thing is we've varied where we've sailed out of based on where we could get a deal, or we're sailing out of San Diego again because we don't have to fly into San Diego. It's a drivable distance for us in comparison to Florida. So those are all things to consider to help make it possible. Because, when you're cruising with 6, you're already getting 2 cabins. It is expensive, but there's a lot of value to be had. And we just love the exposure our kids get to the world. You have so many different nationalities on board that if you want your kids to have a wider global view, be able to meet people who look different, talk different, have different experiences, different cultures, you can do that have a lot of exposure in one place because of the diversity on board a cruise and the opportunity to visit multiple places on a single trip. So we love that aspect.
Wow. All good points there, Bryan.
Yeah, I think that wraps up this episode. It's like a perfect way to sort of end it.
I think so too. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not even going to do any of my little snark today, Christy. So
no snark.
No snark. So, Bryan, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this with us today, to kind of pass on your knowledge of traveling with a larger group with Disney Cruise Line. So many different tips and tricks. And if anybody else out there has any questions, if Michelle has this question, then I know that a lot of other people are probably asking the same question. If you have some questions and want to direct them to either myself, Steve at the DCL podcast, or Christy at Pack Your Pixie Dust, we will definitely put together another episode and answer your questions as well. So I guess we need to get out of here because I need to get some dinner. And Bryan, you need to start planning for another cruise. It sounds like his spring break is right around the corner.
Yep, I didn't mention it on the last episode because it was a surprise for my kids for Christmas, but we are cruising on the Wonder out of San Diego here in a couple of weeks for spring break, and then going to go visit Disneyland for the first time since the pandemic. So excited for that trip.
Well, super excited for you as well. So any final thoughts before we get out of here tonight, Christy?
My one final thought is that Bryan is a part of our Patreon group, and we have a pretty cool Facebook group for Patreon. We actually just started an Instagram page. I don't think Steve knows really about it yet for Patreon. It's a great community. And if that's something you're interested in, check it out at patreon.com/DCL podcast.
Yeah, a lot of people helping each other out, Cruise a Little Smarters, which is what we're trying to do, is just kind of pass on that knowledge and support each other with whatever they need when it comes time to planning their trips or while they're on their trips as well. So Bryan, all the best to you and your family as you sail, and we can't wait to talk to you as you get back off the Disney Wonder and hear about all the fun that you have down in Mexico and Disneyland as well.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you. And I'll just double click. The Patreon is also a lot of fun. It's a fun group. So there's some entertainment value there too.
All right. All the best, Bryan. Thank you once again, and we'll see you soon. And thanks for coming back to take a listen. We'll see you soon on the DCL podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
The DCL podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.